What is up, guys? Rick Cacus here, and Destiny 2 is fast approaching, with the worldwide gameplay premiere happening May 18th. Now, if you missed my update video, I'm actually going to have a chance to go to this event and play Destiny 2. So if you want exclusive Destiny 2 content and gameplay, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But today, we are going to talk about what Bungie can do to improve the weapon system in Destiny 2. Now, I've already made a video discussing some of the things that Bungie can do to improve the armor system, but today it's the turn of the weapons. And the reason I'm making this video is to really just discuss with you guys, and honestly just to get my own thoughts in order about what things I'm looking for when I get to see and play Destiny 2. What improvements Bungie needs to make in order for me to say, yes, we're on the right path. Bungie has made great strides in improving the weapon system in Destiny 2. I think failure to do these things, and these are pretty broad strokes, kind of common sense things, is going to be definitely a negative, and it's going to take away from me full bore saying, yeah, Destiny 2 hype train, most amazing game ever graced upon by man. So that's why I'm really making this video. And let's get started. There's 4 key areas I have identified as kind of pillars that Bungie really needs to nail. I would expect these things to be done, but nonetheless they are very important to talk about. So, number 1, what is the number 1 thing that Bungie can do to improve the gun system? And we're going to kind of start broad strokes and work our way into a little bit of a more narrow design space, but number 1, more gun types. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have said this or thought this yourselves. More gun types is absolutely a key factor in differentiating the gameplay experience in Destiny 2. If that game comes out and they've got pretty much the same gun types, or they have one new heavy gun type, I'm going to be incredibly disappointed. But introducing a new gun type will have massive effects on the in-game experience. Just look at primary weapons. We've had the same 4 primary gun types with auto rifles, pulse rifles, scout rifles, and hand cannons for 3 years. And there's actually pretty decent play in these 4 different gun types. Like for PvE, if I said, a great PvE gun is the Fatebringer hand cannon, I'm sure some of you would go, well, what about the Genesis chain? And then more of you would go, well, don't forget about the Burning Eye, like that thing's top tier. And then others would chime in, you best not forget about the Steel Medulla pulse rifle. And that's a really good thing. Using these different weapons, and in PvE as well, going from a pulse rifle to a hand cannon. These are very different gameplay experiences. And we've been using these same weapons for, again, going on 3 years now. Can you imagine how much different a game would feel? Can you imagine how much different Destiny 2 would feel with a new primary gun type? And there's already been pretty substantial evidence that SMGs are coming to the game, with this screenshot showing what looks very much like SMGs. They look very different than the auto rifles right beside them to the left in the armory in the Destiny 2 reveal trailer. So that really says to me that Bungie is introducing new gun types, but I hope they don't stop with SMGs. There are so many awesome new gun types that Bungie could take a look at. Flamethrowers, railguns, laser rifles, plasma cannons, more melee weapons like spears and halberds and battle axes and warhammers, and all of this amazing stuff that I feel that Bungie could definitely, get it right. They could nail the introduction of these things into Destiny 2, and I think that would be absolutely fantastic and also very important in improving and differentiating Destiny 2 from the original Destiny. Okay, now let's move on to point number 2. This is where we get a little bit more specific, because I think one of the key factors and something I'm going to be looking really closely in Destiny 2 is new archetypes. New gun archetypes. Now, those of you who've been with my channel for a long time probably know where I'm going, because I talk about this a lot, but it's so important I think it's worth a reiteration. Right now in Destiny, since the game came out, since the alpha was out nearly 3 years ago, there has been 3 archetypes of auto rifles. The fast firing ones, like the Doctrine, the medium rate of fire ones, like the current Trials one, and then the slow shooting ones, like the Shadow Price. Those 3 are it. There has never, ever been an attempt to diversify these archetypes, and I think that's a huge problem. If you look at the actual numbers, like the fast firing ones are 900 rounds per minute, or thereabout. The medium rate of fire ones are 600, and then these slow shooting ones are around 450. There are so many different options for archetypes in between these numbers. What about 800 rounds per minute? What about 750? What about even slower? We're talking 300 rounds per minute. What about in between 6 and 400? What about like 550? What about even faster, like 1,000 rounds per minute? There are so many different things Bungie could do to diversify the auto rifles, and frankly, not doing so has kind of led to some problems. It means that when they introduce a new expansion, when the Rise of Iron came out, did the loot feel that different? You know, not really, and that's because you really are using guns that fire exactly the same and do the same damage as other guns that you've been using for the last years and years and years, so it's just not a good plan. I really hope Bungie diversifies these archetypes. Now, of course, I used auto rifles as a very specific example, but the same thing applies to hand cannons. Only 3 archetypes. Scout rifles, 4, and that's it. Right? It applies pretty much everywhere throughout Destiny's different gun types, with like very few exceptions, with the one kind of being the introduction of Haka pulse rifles, but we'll get to that in literally just a sec. But again, introducing those additional archetypes is really going to allow you to have new gameplay experiences when playing Destiny 2. Otherwise, it's going to feel very, very like worryingly similar to Destiny 1. If, yep, you log on to Destiny 2 and it's the same 3 auto rifle archetypes you've been using for the last 3 years. That would be incredibly disappointing. Bungie needs to innovate in this area. But moving on to what I alluded to earlier, there needs to be more differences between the weapon foundries. Now, Bungie, to their credit, it actually looks like they are doing this. What is on the big Destiny 2 poster that we're seeing absolutely everywhere? Well, the first main guy is holding a very specific Omelon weapon. Like, it's clearly Omelon. It looks like an Omelon auto rifle to me. The guy to his right is very clearly using a Suros shotgun. Now, the interesting part is that both of those aren't properly represented in Destiny 1. You can't go out and get a proper Suros shotgun. Yes, there are lingering blues from when before they actually reintroduced these proper foundries, but you can't get like a proper Suros shotgun that actually looks like the Suros shotgun the guy is using in the poster. And that tells me that they're, you know, fixing up and reiterating and kind of almost reintroducing, because they went a little bit away from the foundry weaponry design space after the Taken King, but they're really kind of revamping foundries in Destiny 2, adding these missing combinations, and hopefully doing again point number 3, which is differentiating these different foundries from one another. It's not good enough, frankly, to look different. A Haka auto rifle looks different than a Suros auto rifle. But what really is the difference? If there's no true difference in how they function, in their perk layout, in the perks they can spawn with, you might as well have them look identical. And that was kind of the problem that was happening with some of the foundries. Like the Suros scout rifles, if you got a really good roll on a Suros DAS-43, and then you had a really good hung jury, they look different, but their function is identical. And that is a problem. The one place where Bungie really did diversify is, funny enough, the pulse rifles, with Haka pulse rifles shooting bursts of 4. Now, this is actually huge. Like, when you use a Haka pulse rifle in Destiny right now, it feels very different than something like a Hawksaw or something like a Parthian Shot or something even like a Hopscotch Pilgrim, the traditional 3-round burst pulse rifles. The Haka ones feel more chunky. They feel like they're doing, you know, a little bit more damage, and, you know, they are in some of the time, but I really hope Bungie expands on this idea. If they are introducing, you know, for example, Omelon auto rifles, Well, how are you going to make Omelon auto rifles different? I would love to see them take a page out of the Hard Light, the existing, Omelon exotic auto rifle in Destiny, and make the Omelon auto rifles, like the legendary ones, have ricocheting bullets. Maybe not to the degree of the Hard Light, if it even is returning in Destiny 2, but to some sort of degree, and that would actually make them a little bit different, a little bit cool. You could bank shots off a wall if you really want to, but that's just something to make them different than the other auto rifles in the game. I would love to see, again, just more of this. The different faction weapons not just looking different, but actually behaving different, having different properties and different special perks they can spawn with. There should be perks that only Haka weapons can spawn with. And the same goes for Suros, Omelon, and whatever other foundries may be introduced into Destiny 2. That would make them very special. That would make them potentially very desirable, especially if there are good perks that you're trying to go after. And that's going to make using a Haka weapon feel different than using an Omelon, than using a Suros, and using a Tex Mechanica weapon in Destiny 2. So I really hope Bungie nails this point. Moving on, however, we have point number 4, the most specific point, but also something very important. Better and more competitive weapon perks. This is absolutely essential because it ended up really in Destiny just being everyone going for what are essentially the exact same roles. And it's rather disappointing. Like, look at hand cannons. For PvP, you want pretty much the same role on your Palindrome as you do on your IS Luna, as you do on your, Devil May Know, or whatever hand cannon you're looking for. It's always range, 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 trying to get rifled barrel, trying to get rangefinder, trying to get, Icarus or something like Outlaw or Reactive Reload or a couple of different perks. I don't want to make it seem like it's the exact same God Roll every time because there's a little bit of play to the perks, but relatively, the fact that everyone agrees almost on what a God Roll is, like if I showed you a really good roll on a Hawksaw where it had perfect balance and rifled barrel and counterbalance, you guys would be like, well, that's amazing, right? And the same thing works for most of the sidearms and pretty much every gun in Destiny. That's a little bit disappointing. I would love to see more perks actually competing with one another, whereas right now we have like top tier perks that everyone goes for every time, like on shotguns, rifled barrel, reinforced barrel. Every time those perks are just by far the best perks. And then you have a bunch of perks that just aren't as good with, hand loaded, hammer forged, all that stuff. They're just not as good. No one is going for those perks when you could get the better, higher range increases. I would love to see more different perks brought in to actually compete with these top tier perks. What about a perk that increases damage but doesn't increase the range? Now you've actually got a question. Now you've actually got a debate going on within the community of which one is better. What about a perk that increases the range even more than rifled barrel but increases the spread? So you have more inconsistency in your shotgun shots. Like, wait a minute, would that be good? Would that be good, or would it be bad, or would it compete? Like, I'm sure a lot of you guys are watching this video kind of thinking, well, would that be good? That is the thought that I want you guys to have. That's a thought that you should have when looking at perks in a gun system is, would that be good? Would it be good when I combine it with this? Or what about this? What about this perk combination? Whereas Destiny right now, too often it boils down to, yep, you have a God roll and that's pretty much it. Now, of course, there's a little bit of difference in roles between PvP and PvE, definitely. I think that's a good area where some weapons are good and have specific PvE roles and other weapons, the opposite for PvP. But again, I'd love to see more perks, a lot more perks brought in Destiny 2, and specifically perks that actually compete with each other, perks that change the behavior of the weapons, and perks that make it so that there is more than one PvP or PvE God roll. And another great example is, what about a perk that would increase auto rifle damage but drastically lower stability? Again, that's another great example of, well, would that be good? Increasing the damage is huge. That's going to increase your time to kill, potentially. But being able to have to get extra close because you can't shoot people at medium to long range because you have terrible stability, like, would that be good? Again, that's the question you should always be asking when looking at perks. And way too often, again, it's, nope, this perk isn't very good, or nope, trash roll, delete. That needs to kind of be lowered down in Destiny 2. And so guys, those are the 4 things I am looking for in Destiny 2 for how Bungie can improve the weapon system. Now, if you agree with what I said in this video, please remember to support it by liking, commenting, and especially sharing. Bungie may not do this stuff right off the bat, but there's no reason why they couldn't introduce any of these things in future updates. Heck, they introduced both of Destiny's, new gun types with melee weapons and sidearms in DLCs. So it's entirely possible that they introduce laser rifles in a DLC in Destiny 2. And it's better that they do that than not do it at all. And so guys, again, if you enjoyed this content and want to see more Destiny and Destiny 2 content, be sure to slap that subscribe button. If you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.